There's a lot of overviews of what generative AI is in general, and that has been great as a primer, but nothing was really specifically speaking to me about what is AI as a learning professional.
Talk through some of the challenges of that. Like, it's not just as simple as sharing a prompt and like, I'm gonna now just have it done for me, right? It's a collaborative process that you're having with the AI as well.
For me, what I found is that I either win or I learn. When I learn, when I fall real hard flat on my face, I want to tell my community about it because I want to learn together.
That's the thing. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's not perfect when it comes out. Like, and just accept that and rather get it out so that either you can react to it or someone else can react to it, and then you can improve it.
You know, I see so many people who are really stressed out about how to begin. And I think part of that has to do with
a lot of people listening who are looking for pointers or ways to get started.
Let's start with the process. Let's start with the strategy. And I can't stress enough how important that human touch is at all phases of the process.
How do we maintain that openness and curiosity and learn about AI without getting sidetracked by shiny objects?
So I think what we can do to kind of avoid the trap of using AI for the sake of using AI without a clear purpose or strategy is instead really thinking about...
I think it's terribly important to insist on individual values.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Initiative, creation, all these things which we value. It's now possible to make organizations on a larger scale than was ever possible before.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Teach people to analyze the kind of things that are said to them.
Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to do this live in person together like this. A lot of people interested in what you have to say, which is awesome, which is why I'm glad to talk to you and unpack some of that. We're going to talk a bit about what you talked about in the session, but also some of the other stuff that you've done in your career.
Great, sounds good.
Starting with the Emmy that you won for a podcast that you produced. What can you teach me about producing podcasts?
I don't know. You seem to have a pretty good idea there, but I'm sure as you found, for me, it was really about meeting the learners where they are. And our learning audience was a group of sales professionals. So they spent a lot of time driving from customer to customer. And why not give them something they can learn during their drive time? So it was really, meeting them where they are. And then I think oftentimes, folks really are focused on the technical skills of what they need to do. But oftentimes, in general, as individuals, we have a hard time potentially fitting in some of the skills behind it. So the how we do what we do. And so in this case, we launched a podcast that was focused on selling skills for our sales professionals, and really wanted to show them how much those skills were transferable. So the same skills that would make me impactful as a sales professional, might also make me more impactful at convincing my husband that I want to get a dog, or, making connections with my 14-year-old daughter, Emma. So we actually interviewed folks outside of our industry as experts. And then we interviewed folks within our organization to talk about, okay, how do we take what those experts talked about and really translate it into what we do every day? So we were able to interview a YouTube influencer who talked about how storytelling is so important in connecting folks to data, and also making that data memorable. We interviewed a Army colonel who talked about how when you're long-term planning, you really need to think about the multiple steps that are going to take, it's going to take to get there. And so thinking about those incremental shifts. And then we interviewed a Olympic swim coach who talked about how she had an agile mindset and how that's really helped her be impactful in life. And then got to interview our sales professionals to say, now, how have you used these skills in the context of your role?
I love that. That's so cool. And how was it received? I mean, you did win an award, like you said, it was an Emmy.
Yeah, my daughter likes to call it an Emmy. I think it was like a Webby or something like that. But yeah, it was really well received because not only were we providing, relevant information of really how can I just take 1, 2, or 3 small things and, be more impactful in what I'm doing. But also now I'm fitting this into the flow of work for me versus trying to find at the end of my day additional time for learning. So I think it was really the two that, helped us really connect with that learner.
Yeah. And like all jokes aside, my podcast is obviously it's like a different type of creation, I guess. What you're describing is something we do as well, which is creating audio lessons essentially for people. That's part of a broader thing. So can you speak to that part of it as well? How did this fit in the broader context of what you were doing?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think oftentimes, that social learning component actually helps to bring it together. I just talked to someone today about how Armchair Expert is one of her favorite podcasts. I listen to it a lot too. And me being able to talk to someone and say, oh, I learned about this and it was so interesting, then I'm learning from them as well.
Exactly.
So we were actually able to create, conversation guides. So now a team could all listen to it on their own during their drive time, so still fitting it into their flow of work, but then come together as a team and share insights of, this is what was really key that I learned, or I tried this and it worked really well, or I tried this and it did not work at all. And y'all don't try that because it's not going to work. So really making sure, and I think that's been a big theme for ATD. Daniel Pink actually talked about, instead of adding more, actually thinking about subtracting some things. So if you're not really thinking about how does this fit within kind of the greater strategy, or how are we pulling this through, it might be a really great resource, but it might fall flat. Versus how can you bring this in as part of the broader curriculum?
Yeah, I love that. And that social aspect is so key. Those guides that you created, just curious, was that for a facilitator to then facilitate a kind of a learning circle? Is it for the manager to facilitate a conversation? How was that used?
Yeah, we made it so anyone could kind of pick it up and do it.
Oh, cool.
So for me, I know sometimes with discussions, I really look up to you in that in the moment, sometimes it's hard for me to think of what are those deep questions that's really going to tell me that great story. So we wanted to make it easy for anyone to be able to pick up. So a manager could do that. Someone who, is looking to develop themselves, and facilitation is something that's going to help them get there. They can pick that up. Or someone who, maybe I'm not doing this as part of my team, but I have 3 or 4 different individuals outside of my team that I think, I'd enjoy kind of connecting with them and having that conversation. So we really tried to make it as user-friendly as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that you mentioned the questions. Like I was just talking about this at lunch, that like a lot of what we do is, I think as you go through school and like the way we are all taught, the stuff that we have to kind of unlearn now, right, is the questions are given to us and we have to come up with the answers, and we try and memorize stuff to do that, right? And then when you get into the workplace, it's flipped. You have to come up with the questions, and no one's taught you how to do that. And so these guides are kind of like a collection of questions to help with that, right?
To help facilitate that discussion. Yeah, I think the other thing is, though, as kids, I know, I used to get the feedback all the time, like, oh my gosh, you ask so many questions. And we get to a place as we get older where we're asking less and less questions because we feel like we should either have the answer, or we're bothering folks by asking those questions. When really, when you think about how most of us learn, it is in asking those questions. So exactly, giving folks kind of that boost that they need to ask those questions, and maybe from that, they might ask their own, but just to get them started.
Definitely, yeah. And then curiosity then kicks in often and gets it going. So okay, I could go into into a lot more detail, but I want to move to AI because something that you came here to talk about, something you're really passionate about, curious about, probably even a better word, both of those. There's a lot of change that goes with that, and I think you like to learn from change. Like that's something you throughout your career. One of the challenges you and I talked about when we were prepping for this is with AI is kind of the shiny object syndrome, right? There's so much change. There's so many new vendors. You probably saw like 1,000 new vendors in the booths in the conference, right? How do we maintain that openness and curiosity and learn about AI without getting sidetracked by shiny objects?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I actually jotted down a quote. Kai-Fu Lee, who's an AI expert and chairman and CEO of Sinovation Ventures, actually said, "I believe AI is going to change the world more than anything in the history of humanity, more than electricity."
Wow.
And when we take a moment to reflect on just how much electricity has changed the world, how on a daily basis it really affects and changes our world.
Everything we do, yeah.
That's a pretty provocative statement.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's really about approaching this time with an open mindset, an attitude of curiosity and continuous learning, trying to welcome the change by developing a real interest in not the AI platforms themselves, but in how AI can enhance our processes and accelerate the productivity in our work. So I think, I see so many people who are really stressed out about how to begin. And I think part of that has to do with so much of the conversation has been around platforms and that shiny object. Look, this one can do this and this one can do this. And it's really kind of almost you feel bombarded and, oh my goodness, where do I start? And if I choose this one, am I going to make a mistake versus this one?
Yeah.
So I think what we can do to kind of avoid the trap of using AI for the sake of using AI without a clear purpose or strategy is instead really thinking about what is the process that I'm in? For us as learning professionals, what is the process of creating learning? And where am I spending too much time in one area? What part of the process is really tedious for me? And then, looking at how AI can potentially accelerate some of those pieces. And then I think the biggest thing is just really engaging in conversations with other individuals. That was probably one of the most rewarding pieces of today for me, is getting to have a great discussion with so many different individuals, because I think we can learn so much from each other in terms of here's what I tried and worked really well to help with the process, but also, here's what I tried and it really did not work at all. I totally fell on my face, and I want to share that so y'all don't make that same mistake.
Yeah, I mean, this is another thing we were talking about at lunch and talk about a lot in our work, is the fact that we all see reality differently and we have different perspectives, and sort of that initial mindset shift of that I don't see the full picture, and by talking to people I can get more of that. And it seems like with AI that could not be more true, right? Because it's so new and so there is so much out there. I bet you've learned a ton in just talking to people after your session.
Yes.
That accelerates even some of the things that you're thinking about. So yeah, I completely agree with that point. I then go back to the process piece. It's also so key, right? Like being able to, it's context, right? Like being able to immerse yourself in the process, the context, then figure out how to use the technology. And you've done that by using Addy as a process. And I think what I'd love to explore with you is like how you have been, like some practical examples of how you've been using AI through that process, because I think that a lot of people listening who are looking for pointers or ways to get started, like you were saying, and we'll talk through some of the challenges of that. Like it's not just as simple as sharing a prompt and then getting a prompt and like I'm now just have it done for me, right? It's a collaborative process that you're doing with the AI as well, right? But to maybe just start us off, how did you first get into it? How did you first start to think through how this could actually help you in your work?
I actually took a course with the Digital Learning Institute. And because I wanted to be more strategic about my approach, I had seen so much in terms of learning of, there's a lot of overviews of what generative AI is in general, and that has been great as a primer, but nothing was really specifically speaking to me about what is AI as a learning professional. So I started with that course, which was so helpful. It was, I think, a 2 or 3 month course that I took that really actually said, like, let's start with the process. Let's start with the strategy. And they started by, let's do a quick ADDIE refresher. I know everyone has their own instructional design model.
Yeah.
Some people might be using Agile. Some people use SAM. They're all pretty similar. But when you're thinking about how are you analyzing, how are you designing, how are you developing, how are you implementing, and how are you evaluating the learning that you're doing? Where are the moments in time that AI can enhance your productivity so that you can spend more time potentially talking to SMEs or, doing some of the things that, the AI is just not going to be able to help you do.
Stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like you mentioned productivity as well, because it does accelerate some of the thinking or brainstorming or analysis, synthesis, all that sort of stuff that cognitive functions basically, right? That we would have to do otherwise. But now you can focus in on, like you said, conversation. So are there any particular phases within that ADDIE process that you found AI to be more useful for than others?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I can't stress enough how important that human touch is at all phases of the process. I had a friend who refers to AI as her intern. And I think it's such a good analogy. Really thinking about, when you think about an intern, it's someone who can kind of start on some of those projects, get some of those initial brainstorms. It's someone who is probably going to make some mistakes, right?
Yeah.
It's someone who's going to need a lot of coaching. You're, going to have to go in and adjust, but it really gives you, that intern might really give you kind of a good starting point on a lot of pieces.
Yeah.
And so if I had to pick one stage of the ADDIE process that I'm most excited about, it would be the implementation stage. Because what we're seeing, as we're thinking about how do we deploy learning to our learners, how are we making sure that the right learning is getting to the right learner in the right moment, what you're seeing in that stage is really a transformation of learning experience. One of the most valuable ways for learners to grasp and apply knowledge is through experiential learning. But what we've seen is that can be really challenging to push out in a scalable type of way.
Yeah.
And with the help of AI, we've been seeing that you can create these interactive simulations. One of the tools one of the teams we've been working with is Quantified AI. And we started working with them. It was a presentation tool. So some of our C-suite leadership teams were able to go in. They could give a presentation on anything they wanted, and they were able to get feedback on 24 different behavioral indicators of, you're really strong in this area, but this is an area where if you could enhance your capabilities in this area, you could be that much more impactful. Getting real-time feedback in the moment. We continue to work with this team and said, okay, it's great that you can give us some feedback on how we're saying what we're saying, but we have new hires coming through, new hire salespeople, and they really need feedback not only on how they're saying what they're saying, but also what they're saying. And so we've been able to kind of program in, when you think about product knowledge, all this different product knowledge, where, as part of the new hire process, they're able to practice within this platform so that they can be better prepared to then get in front of HCPs, because you want to make all your mistakes in that practice, so that once you're in front of HCPs, you can be really impactful. And so our learners are getting very specific in the moment feedback that is helping them see, okay, here's where I'm hitting the mark, here's where I still need to grow. So within the implementation stage, that's one area, but we're also seeing a lot more adaptive learning as well. So Sana Labs is another platform that we work with, and you can actually plug in some of your learning modules that you might have. And now professionals that have, years of experience can do an assessment at the beginning of their learning experience. And Sana Labs can actually say, okay, we can skip over this part, and this part because you're already proficient here, which gives you more time to hone into these other areas which you don't already know, or potentially gives you more capability to get into some of those experiential learning opportunities, because now you have extra time as part of the process, because we're not just taking every learner and treating them as the same. We're really starting to customize. So I would say out of all the stages, while I think AI really lends to each and every stage, that implementation stage is really the one that I think is going to be a game changer when it comes to transforming that learning experience.
Yeah, that is awesome. Are you able to share examples of some of these ideas that you shared? Like, because I'm also thinking, like, are you using, it sounds like you're using tools like these Quantified AI, Sana Labs, but, can this be done through a ChatGPT interface? Like, what does it look like practically?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I know there's a lot of different platforms when it comes with simulators. And while the organization I work with, we work with Sana Labs, there's also Area 9. So there's a lot of different platforms. I think in terms of, depending on what your budget is and what you're looking for, I had a question today around, well, could you feed in a prompt and have the simulator, or have a simulation built. And in other platforms you can. For Quantified AI, if you are looking for a vendor that's going to really give you kind of full service and guide you through it, that's been a good piece to start off with. I think in terms of kind of hard and fast examples, for me, that would come a little bit more in the analysis stage is where I started using AI. So thinking about the hours and hours and hours that we would spend analyzing data. We have test scores from our learners. We have evaluations from our learners, and you can spend a lot of time and money.
Trying to identify themes across them, for example. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is really where I started using AI, in that, now I can ask my AI intern to kind of get started with all of that. So in the analysis stage, one of the areas that I started with in terms of prompts is synthesize the following data for top 3 positive themes, top 3 constructive themes, and 3 action steps for moving forward. And in 30 seconds, ChatGPT, if that's what you're using, or some folks are using Microsoft Copilot, it really doesn't matter the platform. There's so many that are similar. But my AI intern gave me a really good place to start. And so I think oftentimes you have pretty quick turnarounds. You want to show up with some of these senior decision makers and be a strategic and collaborative partner. And I think our AI assistant, using a prompt like that, can really help us get to a place where, I think oftentimes we become order takers, and our senior decision makers are saying, well, this is really what we need. And it can be, okay, yes, and we can do that. Let's take a moment to strategically look at the data as well. And here's what we're seeing in terms of some of those learning gaps. So that's one prompt that took me a while to kind of tiny tweak it a little bit, but I found that one is particularly helpful.
Yeah, so let's talk about that process of tweaking as well, because that's an important part of this. This isn't a case of just copy your prompts, put my stuff in, and I'm going to get a result. Also, actually, before I even get to that, you said your intern gave you a place to start.
Yes.
It didn't give you the final thing.
No.
Right? So what does that mean?
Yeah, so, you might find you've asked for constructive feedback, and it's, they actually listed some positive feedback here. the results you get are not going to be perfect, but what in turn is going to be perfect. Right. So it does take that human touch to kind of take a look at things, say, okay, does this reflect what I'm actually seeing? Are some of the pieces of data, that the intern has come out with skewed because of something that's happened? So you do need that human touch to kind of infer. And, there have been times where I've asked questions and just the response is not what I'm looking for. And I've either had to get a little bit more specific about how I'm asking that question, or maybe I needed to get a little bit more broad because it wasn't capturing everything. So really taking a look at, it's not, I'm going to put in this prompt and then I'm going to immediately send out the results. It's really, I'm going to put these prompts in, potentially, tiny tweak the prompts depending on what I'm getting out, changing up some of the wording or how some of that data is displaying before moving forward.
Yeah. So talk me through that tweaking process, because I'm having played around with this, had a similar thing of I almost also want to get your take on how you see the AI, because I had this weird reflection the other day that I was always very polite. I was always please, can you do this? And please, and actually then I realized was I wasn't being maybe as almost definite or descriptive what I wanted, right? And so then I started to get more into telling it what to do.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's just that subtle mindset shift started to then really force me to think critically about the thing. And it's not, you can obviously do this because it doesn't have emotions or anything. You're not trying to, so you don't have to almost deal with that side of things, which complicate things. You can just get to no, this wasn't right. Do this part. So did you have a similar, how do you think about that interaction with the AI?
Yeah, I think, and it's so funny when you move from platform to platform, because there are some where in one case it's I like the writing style a little bit more here versus here. It's not just even about, the AI getting it wrong, but really in some situations you might want something that's more conversational style. Yeah. And so, if I'm asking for, something that I'm going to deliver as learning for new hires, I might want it to be more upbeat and conversational. And so it's, to your point, putting in those specific descriptors. For some of my, leadership or decision makers, they don't have time for the full paragraph. And so it might be saying more, I need, something that's concise, no more than 3 sentences, and actually, can you bullet point it out? So I think that it's less about kind of telling it the wrong thing, and it's more about just, with ChatGPT, I put in some prompts, and they've given me full on very verbose, which is funny for me because I'm pretty wordy in general. So to get responses that are wordier than I might have is typically kind of funny for me. And it's not about saying, okay, that prompt didn't work, I have to start all over again. It's potentially just building on that and saying, okay, can we make this a little bit more concise, no more than 4 sentences? And then, it spits that out, and then, okay, but can we put this in a little bit more upbeat of a tone or a conversational tone? And so, there are a lot of folks who I have talked to who are I tried, Julie. I've tried. I put some things in there. I just did not like what came out, and I give up. I need someone to tell me, what prompts. And so that's why, here I think it's good that we're sharing some potential prompts. But just, you can keep building upon that if it's not giving you exactly what you're looking for. That you're only interested in that end result. So you can go on forever. That's the thing, right? And you can just say okay, make that more upbeat. Also, I don't like bullet 3. Give me another variation on the first 2. And you just constantly just iterate. You can keep doing that forever, basically. My best friend, we're actually throwing her a bachelorette party next weekend. And I asked for 10 hashtag themes. Didn't really love any of them, and said, okay, give me 15 more. So exactly to your point. Yes.
exactly. And it's just this takes me. We talk a lot about creativity and the creative process, and there's a principle of that's quantity is really important of ideas, and that no idea comes out right or true. It has to go through a process of basically of other people looking at it and agreeing, so
Yep.
that's kind of what we're trying to say here is like AI enables us to do that at an accelerated level. You can have 25 different ideas for hashtags and then go through them and even like pick, looking at those 25, you come up with your own 26th one, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the benefit of it.
It's getting that initial brainstorm for you. I could tell today during our presentation, I said, how many people out there it's that first time getting things on paper that you really struggle with. And I just watched people nod and it really resonated. And now our AI intern can do that piece and you can spend more time in refining to your point of, okay, I like a little bit of number 1, but a little bit of number 5 and, and I will take all the time for refining that I can get. I've had managers who have said, Julie, progress over perfection. So if I can get more time in that refining mode, then, I'll take it.
Did you hear that, Mac? Progress over perfection. Like that's exactly, this is now the third thing you said that we were talking about at lunch today. Yeah. Yeah, because that's the thing, right? Like no idea is right or true. That's the thing. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. It's not perfect when it comes out. Like, and just accept that and rather get it out so that either you can react to it or someone else can react to it and then you can improve it. Yeah, this is a great metaphor for just in problem solving in general.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't realize the time, and we're already getting close to the end here. Like maybe a last thought on the AI thing. What excites you about what's next for AI in the learning space?
Yeah, I think it's so difficult to predict because I think the technology is changing so quickly. It feels a little bit like New England weather to me. If you don't like it in the moment, it's okay. It's going to change in about 15 minutes. But, just going back to what I had been talking about, I think where I'm most excited is what it's going to do for the learner experience. I think, the ability for AI to really customize learning, to really meet the learner in the moment, I think we're going to see much, much more having learning accessible to the right learner in the right moment and giving them that feedback that they need to your point, iterate in the moment and grow in the moment. So next year we could sit down and none of what I had predicted had come to fruition. What I really see is that learner experience is going to be truly transformed.
Yeah. I love that. And as you think about this in your role now as well, like helping people navigate through this change and to lead, through that change, what are like where does that rank as a priority for you? What are you trying to? Let me start there actually.
Yeah, I think to me, navigating through this change really comes down to embracing the mindset of embracing failure. That Olympic swim coach that I had mentioned earlier had actually encouraged her athletes to do it wrong a different way. And I think that really takes the stigma away from failure. It really allows people to have the courage to try new things, to potentially fall flat on their face. And for me, what I found is that I either win or I learn. And when I learn, when I fall real hard flat on my face, I want to tell my community about it because I want to learn together. I think we're in this incredible time period where we can all lift each other up by learning together and sharing our mistakes. So I think in our organization, we have this incredible culture of coming together as a learning community, and we have folks across different parts of the organization coming together to say, hey, here are some things that I tried. What was your result? Today, Courtney and I had shared our LinkedIn profiles with our attendees at our session saying, you're now part of our learning community too. We want to hear, what prompts are you using? What's worked really well for you? We hope to share the same. So I think it's, both embracing that, it's okay to fail mindset, and let's learn together. Let's share together. Let's bring in that social learning component that's really going to get us through this time.
I love that. Those are great messages, and yeah, I couldn't agree more. What final question? What's next for you, Julie, and what value do you want to embody into that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've been reflecting a lot about the learning zone model for those who aren't familiar with it. So, think of a circle with 3 rings, and in that center ring, you have your comfort zone. So, you basically know what you're doing. You're not necessarily really learning or being stretched, but you feel pretty comfortable in there. And then when we think on the opposite part to the most outer layer, that's really kind of your stress zone or your panic zone. You're being asked to do so much that's out of your comfort zone that, you're too stressed to learn.
Disorientating.
Exactly. And in that middle part, that is that growth zone. So you're being stretched outside of your comfort zone. You're really starting to learn and grow. That's kind of that sweet spot that we want to be in. Actually, Matthew McConaughey was asked yesterday how he chooses his next role. And he said he leans into the things that scares him in a good way. And I think that's such a good mindset to have. Yeah. And I am ready to kind of take that next step in my career. Not quite sure yet what that is. But what my hope is that it's going to stretch and challenge me in new ways. And that I can continue to be a part of what is this evolution of learning going to be. And so in terms of, that value, just really embracing curiosity and a readiness to learn and grow.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. And yeah, good luck on that journey. And I'm excited to follow along.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Hello. I hope you enjoyed that episode. It's Andrew again with a quick message. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is to leave us ratings and reviews where you listened. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe buttons, and feel free to leave a comment. We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please take the time to give us a rating and leave a review. Once again, we love hearing from our loyal listeners. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please hit the follow button to make sure that you don't miss new episodes as they come out. See you next week for another episode of the Learning Culture Podcast. Thank you for listening.